Hello and welcome to this day in history for November 10th. November 10th is the 314th day of the year in the Gregorian calendar, with 51 days remaining until the end of the year. And I don't know if you can hear that airplane going on overhead, but I live in West Fort Worth where every day is an air show. Today we're going to start in the year 1775 with the birth of the U.S. Marine Corps. During the American Revolution, the Continental Congress passed a resolution stating that 2 battalions of Marines be raised for service as landing forces for the recently formed Continental Navy. The resolution, drafted by future U.S. Resident John Adams and adopted in Philadelphia, created the Continental Marines and is now observed as the birth date of the United States Marine Corps. Happy birthday, Marines! In 1808, Osage Indians ceded Missouri and Arkansas lands. In a decision that would eventually make them one of the wealthiest surviving Native American nations, the Osage Indians agreed to abandon their lands in Missouri and Arkansas in exchange for a reservation in Oklahoma. But first they moved to Kansas. American negotiators convinced the Osage to abandon their traditional lands and peacefully move to a reservation in southern Kansas in 1810. When American settlers began to covet the Osage reservation in Kansas, the tribe agreed to yet another move, relocating to what is now Osage County, Oklahoma in 1872. And you take a look at a map sometime. Osage County is huge. I think it's the biggest county in Oklahoma. It's big. Most Indian tribes were devastated by such relocations, but the Osage proved unusually successful in adapting to the demands of living in a world dominated by Anglo-Americans, thanks in part to the fortunate presence of large reserves of oil and gas on their Oklahoma reservation. In concert with their effective management of grazing contracts to Anglos, the Osage amassed enormous wealth during the 20th century from their oil and gas deposits, eventually becoming the wealthiest tribe in North America. Go Osage! In 1865, a man named Henry Wurz was hanged for murder. Henry Wurz was a Swiss immigrant and the commander of the Andersonville prison in Georgia. He was hanged for the murder of soldiers incarcerated there during the Civil War. He oversaw an operation in which thousands of inmates died. Although he did demonstrate indifference towards the prisoners, he was in part a scapegoat, and some evidence against him may have been fabricated entirely. The 41-year-old Wurz was one of the few people convicted and executed for crimes committed during the Civil War. In 1871, Henry Morton Stanley locates the missing explorer and missionary Dr. David Livingstone in Ujiji near Lake Tanganyika, famously greeting him with the words, "Dr. Livingstone, I presume?" In 1903, a woman named Mary Anderson patented windshield wipers. The Patent Office awarded U.S. patent number 743801 to a Birmingham, Alabama woman named Mary Anderson for her window cleaning device for electric cars and other vehicles to remove snow, ice, or sleet from the window. When she received the patent, she tried to sell it to a Canadian manufacturing firm, but the company refused. The device had no practical value, they said, and so it was not worth any money. People scoffed at Anderson's invention, saying that the wipers movement would distract the driver and cause accidents. Her patent expired before she could entice anyone to use her idea. Though mechanical windshield wipers were standard equipment in passenger cars by around 1913, Anderson never profited from the invention. In 1909, John David Marks was born. John David Marks was an American songwriter, and although he was actually Jewish, he specialized in Christmas songs. He wrote many holiday standards, including Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, A Holly Jolly Christmas, Silver and Gold, I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day, and Run, Rudolph, Run. Thank you, Mr. Marks, for your contribution to our musical legacy. He passed away in 1985. In 1918, the Western Union Cable Office in North Sydney, Nova Scotia received a top-secret coded message from Europe that would be sent to Ottawa and Washington, D.C. that said, on November 11, 1918, all fighting would cease. On land, sea, and in the air. On November 10, 1925, Welsh singer and actor Richard Burton was born. You'll remember that we mentioned him the other day when we talked about Elizabeth Taylor. It's hard to mention one without the other. A defiant alcoholic, Richard Burton developed cirrhosis of the liver and died in 1984 of a brain hemorrhage. He and Elizabeth Taylor had discussed being buried together, but he was married to someone else now. So his widow Sally purchased the plot next to Burton's and erected a large headstone across both of them, one might think to prevent Taylor from being buried there. Ooh-wee with his Burton-Taylor celebrity gossip. In 1928, the World War I novel All Quiet on the Western Front was published. With All Quiet on the Western Front, the book's author, Eric Paul Remarque, emerged as an eloquent spokesperson for a generation that had been, in his own words, destroyed by war, even though it might have escaped its shells. Remarque's harshest critics, in turn, were his own countrymen, many of whom felt the book denigrated the German war effort and that Remarque had exaggerated the horrors of war in order to further his pacifist agenda. Not surprisingly, the strongest voices against Remarque came from the emerging National Socialist Party, a group led by the future Führer Adolf Hitler. In 1933, when the Nazis rose to power, All Quiet on the Western Front became one of the first degenerate books to be publicly burnt. Nazi book burnings. In 1942, the Germans took Vichy, France, which had previously been free of Axis military presence. In 1947, English singer, songwriter, bassist, guitarist, and record producer Gregory Stewart Lake, better known as Greg Lake, was born on this day. He gained prominence as a founding member of the progressive rock bands King Crimson and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. He'd be the Lake of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Greg Lake began to play the guitar at the age of 12 and wrote his first song, Lucky Man, at that age. He died in 2016 at the age of 69. In 1951, with rollout of the North American numbering plan, direct dial coast-to-coast telephone service began in the United States. In 1958, the Hope Diamond was donated to the Smithsonian Institution by New York diamond merchant Harry Winston. The Hope Diamond is one of the most famous jewels in the world, with ownership records dating back almost 4 centuries. Its much admired rare blue color is due to trace amounts of boron atoms. Weighing in at 45.52 carats, it has been described as about the size of a pigeon's egg or a walnut. Probably have a tumbled agate about that size. It actually measures about 25.6 millimeters by 21.78 millimeters by 12 millimeters. Or 1 inch by 7/8 inch by 15/32 inch. Its exceptional size revealed new findings about the formation of gemstones. The Hope Diamond has long been rumored to carry a curse, possibly due to agents trying to arouse interest in the stone. It was last reported to be insured for $250 million. In 1968, on this date, American comedian, actor, and producer Tracy Morgan was born. You might remember Tracy Morgan from Saturday Night Live fame. On November 10th, 1969, Sesame Street, a pioneering TV show that has taught generations of young children the alphabet and how to count, made its broadcast debut. That makes today, in 2019, as I'm recording, its 50th anniversary. Sesame Street is 50 years old. Sesame Street, with its memorable theme song, Can You Tell Me How to Get to Sesame Street, went on to become the most widely viewed children's program in the world. It has aired in more than 120 countries. On November 10, 1973, newspapers reported the burning of 36 copies of Slaughterhouse Five by Kurt Vonnegut. This book was a combination of real events and science fiction. The hero, Billy Pilgrim, was a World War II soldier who witnessed the firebombing of Dresden, as had Vonnegut himself. Pilgrim became unstuck in time, and thereafter lived a double existence. One life on an alien planet where resigned acceptance of inevitable doom expressed itself philosophically in the hopeless locution, and so it goes. In his life on Earth, Pilgrim preached the same philosophy. I don't remember that about it. I may have to read it again to refresh my memory. Anyway, some felt the book had a pessimistic outlook and a dark humor unsuitable for school children. I think that would depend on the age of the school children, and there may have been some kind of political power struggle motivation behind it also. On a personal note, I assert that burning books is a terrible idea. Book burning is emblematic of a harsh and oppressive regime that seeks to censor or silence some aspect of prevailing culture. Interestingly, book burners seem to like to make quite a presentation of it. If their true goal is to make the ideas in those books disappear, they are going about it the wrong way. Because by bringing that much attention to the process of burning books, what they actually do is bring more attention to and pique curiosity about those books and the ideas in them. None of Vonnegut's many other novels generated as much controversy as Slaughterhouse Five. I think I really do need to read Slaughterhouse Five again. Vonnegut had an experimental writing style, combining the real, the absurd, the satiric, the fanciful, and this all attracted attention and made his books popular. We'll actually talk about him again tomorrow, which is his birthday. On November 10th of 1975, the SS Edmund Fitzgerald sunk in Lake Superior, killing all 29 crew members on board. It was the worst single accident in Lake Superior's history. The Fitzgerald's sinking was the worst wreck in the Great Lakes since November 29, 1966, when 28 people died in the sinking of the Daniel J. Morrell in Lake Huron. You know, when you look at a map of the world and you see those Great Lakes, they look little bitty, but in fuller context, they're huge. I mean, you can't see the shore on the other side. The Edmund Fitzgerald disaster was immortalized in song the following year when Canadian folk singer Gordon Lightfoot wrote The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. On November 10, 1983, Bill Gates introduced Windows 1.0. On this date in 1989, Germans began to tear down the Berlin Wall. This next item, I wasn't quite sure which year to locate, so I'll tell you here. A short story by H.G. Wells called The Queer Story of Brownlow's Newspaper takes place on November 10, 1931, and opens with the protagonist, Brownlow, accidentally being delivered a newspaper dated November 10, 1971, which, of course, was a future date at the time of writing. The story was first published in the February 1932 issue of Ladies' Home Journal. The story is mainly a description of the contents of the newspaper, which featured color photography throughout, which was a futuristic thing from 1931, and the author taking the opportunity to issue some prophecies of what he felt 1971 might hold. Successful prophecies included lower birth rates, an emphasis on psychological motivation in fiction, mentions of geothermal energy, and wider coverage of scientific news, while the unsuccessful prophecies included simplified spelling of English, a 13-month reformed calendar, the extinction of gorillas, and hints at some form of world government. Well, maybe they hadn't come true by 1971, but some of those are still in the works. And I think that's going to wrap it up for us today. As always, links to my research are included in the show notes. Thank you so much for watching. Give it a like if you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and feel free to share. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time. No, it's not October, it's November. All right, let's try this again. Blah, 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 coffee mug. Hello, kitty. Hello, parody. In 1972, H.
Your call cannot be taken at the moment, so please leave your message.
Thank you. Thank you so much. They don't want to leave a message. Somewhere I have an outgoing message that says, if you're not going to leave a message, stop calling. But I don't think I have that one on my answering machine. We don't need to repeat the date again. Who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men? She's not a man. Sure would be nice if I could ever read one of these in its entirety without having to start anything over. That would be awesome. I might have to take another look at that. I'm going to have to look at that. Oh, better take a look at that. This is why I don't do live shows.